Okay, I think we're live, right? Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Everybody, hi. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jorge Becerra. I'm head of strategy at Alma, and I'll have the privilege to be your host today. We have a very special session prepared for you. We are gonna try to answer one of the most common questions in marketing today in the US, which is how brands can win in the 2026 World Cup. Before we start, quick housekeeping. We are recording, so we can share the replay with those who couldn't make it live. Please, 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 we encourage you to use the Q&A tab to share your questions. We'll pause near the end so our panelists can take a few questions live. This is an exciting topic. We have a lot to cover, so let's dive in. If you're connected today or watching the session at some point, you probably already know that soccer in 2026 is a must-win moment. With 6 weeks of matches, the World Cup will dominate screens all year long, most likely. And being on our home turf with more games than any other World Cup, this is said to be the biggest cultural and economic event of the year. Soccer viewership is expected to skyrocket next year, reaching nearly 132 million Americans watching the World Cup or following the World Cup, which is 10% more than the Super Bowl audience in 2024, just to have that as perspective. The truth of the matter is that soccer and the World Cup are now mainstream in America. For soccer fans out there, yes, we won. And in fact, 40% of Americans will be watching the tournament, which proves soccer is no longer just a Latino story. Americans from every segment are planning to tune in, making this truly, truly, truly a national moment. In fact, the World Cup is projected to drive $41 billion in economic impact. Almost every category is expected to see sales spikes: snacks, drinks, takeout services, hotels, streamers, airlines, home appliances, you name it. The reality is that the World Cup is going to be everybody's business next year. So the question we'll answer today is, what are the things brands can do to claim an unfair share of the 41 billion surge in consumer spending driven by this massive, massive event? Let's bring in the people who are going to help us answer this question. Please join me at welcoming Isaac Mizrahi, CEO at Alma, author of the book Hispanic Market Power, and advisory council member of the US Soccer Federation, and a passionate Fluminense soccer fan. So bienvenido, Isaac. Ricardo Ford, founder of Sport by Ford, formerly led global sponsorships at Visa and Coca-Cola, and have negotiated some of the biggest sports deals in the world. And I also heard that he's a great goalkeeper. So bienvenido, Ricardo. Sara Tusan, co-CEO at TMJ, and as also US Soccer Advisory Council. Sara built major soccer programs at Wells Fargo and now leads one of the top women's football agencies in the country. Adriana Elizondo, managing partner and COO at Interticket, a specialist in soccer talent partnerships. And Nick Anderson, sports and entertainment strategist at Omnicom, who has led both official or has helped both official and non-official World Cup programs and brands for some of the biggest clients around the world. This is definitely an A team, so let's get into the conversation. We have prepared some questions designed to tap into the most common doubts US advertisers might have about the World Cup today. And before we jump in, let me just stop sharing so we can focus on our good-looking panelists. Okay. Sara, let's start with timing. the World Cup is less than 10 months away. You've been on the client side for many years, making huge sponsorship decisions. What would you say to those marketers who feel they are already late to the World Cup party? Is it really too late, or are there still meaningful ways to play and win in 2026?
Yeah, I would say if there's any interest, it's not too late. If there's any interest plus a little bit of budget, it's definitely not too late. So if you have any interest or budget, then you can make something happen. So when I was at Wells Fargo, um, we earnestly back in for the 2018 World Cup, and I was there for almost 9 years, and I went through two World Cup cycles with Wells Fargo. Um, in 2018, we didn't really earnestly start preparing until 2017, like Q4 of 2017. That's when really the plans started getting together. But there was some budget certainly like flagged for 2018, and what that included, again, it was a nice budget relatively speaking. It wasn't Ricardo Ford, Coca-Cola budget, but it was a decent budget. We were able to do a TV campaign that included a variety of different ads to play during the World Cup as part of media buy, some digital ads. We did social media, like live in the moment type of activation. We created digital stickers, whether Giphies or there's a company in Miami called Sports Medias that creates all types of really cool, whether it's AR or stickers for mobile devices, so people can kind of taunt each other and share with each other. We were able to create debit cards for the bank, and as sponsors of the Mexican national team, especially leading up to the World Cup, we were able to leverage that event activation in the months leading into June and July. So the results of what was like I said, really a Q4 earnest program, we saw tens of thousands of new accounts being opened. Really, that was driven in part of two reasons. One, we created really cool debit cards, right? And the bank, it's not the most sexiest of project, of products, but we created debit cards for every team that was in the World Cup, even though we didn't have the IP rights. And then second, um, engagement because of the campaign, which was a little controversial, because we had the U.S. soccer captain rooting for Mexico since the U.S. didn't qualify for the World Cup. We wound up with tons of engagement from a social perspective, in that Wells Fargo was the third most talked about brand at the start of the World Cup behind Nike and Adidas. So like really, it was a pretty proud moment. It was a little scary how much attention we got just based on the campaigns, but it was really great. And so I would say, just we were able to pull it off in less than a year. And again, I think our budget was a little more humble compared to, a sponsor. But, I think if we're looking at what brands can do now, I would think about what does your brand, is there any way it can naturally tie into soccer somehow? Is there something you can offer? Do you have any connection to existing sponsors that maybe you can collaborate with?
Okay,
There's a whole
that's
ecosystem to
great.
explore. And so I think there's tons of things that you can really look at. Youth soccer, women's soccer, it's not too late. There's tons of areas to play in. So I'd say that's it for now.
I love the idea that if there's interest, you're not late. There's
Yeah,
always a way to
that's
activate
right.
this.
That's right.
Nick, uh, let me ask you something that we hear constantly from many of our clients. Only a small set of brands will have official rights. If I'm not mistaken, only 18 brands will be official FIFA sponsors. So
Mhm.
for the thousands of others, from your perspective, how can non-sponsor brands capture attention and activate their brands without the official badge?
Yeah, I guess firstly, there's a couple of reassurances for those without official FIFA rights. The World Cup is obviously all-consuming, and that means that anything a brand does that's sort of soccer related around the tournament, with or without official IP, people will inherently connect the dots. And there's only a handful of moments where that's truly the case. You could say the Olympics, Super Bowl, Christmas, like you could count them on one hand. So it's pretty unique in that sense. I think secondly, the World Cup really transcends soccer fandom. So that really widens like the aperture for brand participation. So, there really are endless creative ways, whatever brand or category, there is a way in to be found. And I think just in terms of the levers and the tactics, I guess it's a long list, but some examples, talent and influencers provide clear workarounds. We know that, and which we'll come on to talk about that in a bit more detail later. I think also really leaning into the national soccer culture of the specific market, in this case, the US, which obviously presents, some really rich nuances versus the rest of the world. Obviously, soccer versus football, and we know that story on the global stage, but, the diversity of nationalities, which of course significantly varies by geography. You've even got things like a bit more left field, like the Ted Lasso effect, which McDonald's played on, even though they're official partner. Like, you could have done this without being official. They played on that back in 2022, and actually, by the way, season 4 is slated for 2026, so a good jumping off point for people thinking outside the box. So lots of less traditional ways in for consideration. And just one last example of, I guess, hijacking the live games themselves. There's an example where Subway, for example, ran like quick fire promotions during being Subway, during substitutions, during every single game throughout the tournament, which were, a matter of seconds, which largely lived in Twitch and TikTok Live, which sort of gamified the viewing experience, but didn't require any official rights whatsoever, and almost like played on the fact that they weren't an official partner, so they could use that to their advantage. So lots of creative ways in for consideration, and almost more flexibility for non-sponsors in some cases.
And this idea of lots of littles, there are so many things you can do that go beyond just the official broadcast partnership, and just seeing the opportunities in the 360 is gonna be very, very important. Ricardo, you've led some of the biggest global sport programs out there. And one of the biggest challenges for any CMO who might be watching us is proving to their CEO that this is the right investment. So what in your opinion was the key to making sure World Cup efforts deliver real return on investment for brands?
So that's one of the most asked questions from C-suite executives, and I think that the key to make investment in whatever size in soccer work for the company is to make sure that this is not limited to a marketing program, because as Nick mentioned, or Sarah as well, the World Cup is a lot more than a sporting event. And because of that, it attracts attention and interest from people from all backgrounds, and inside the company, all different areas. So if you can develop a campaign that allows you to do it, to talk to consumers, but also talk to customers and talk to employees and talk to partners and the more you expand the different constituent groups that you use the World Cup, whatever assets you have, to communicate with them, the more likely you are to get a great ROI. So, when you think about the assets that you're going to build, the rights that you may acquire, you have to think beyond just the consumer, just the fan. You have to treat everybody as a fan, and think about what are the rights that you need to have, if any, to increase employee engagement, for example, or to have a meeting with a prospect that you would otherwise wouldn't have access to. So if any of your prospect partners or companies are investing in soccer, maybe this is it's a door that you're going to open to talk to them. So when you start doing this and you start multiplying by many customers and many employees, and you can calculate with a decent precision the ROI from employee retention, new customer acquisition, consumption, of course, and the financial results, the profitability, etc. Now you can build up an ROI model that tells you how much you make or how much you saved across all these different areas, and this is where most of the return comes from the multiplicity of uses of the World Cup.
That's a great insight. The most usage you give to the World Cup thing, the most likely you'll actually get results. Isaac, the US fan base is incredibly diverse. Different cultures, different languages, different generations, genders, and backgrounds. I grew up in Colombia, and the way I feel and live soccer in the States feels very different. Not only compared to other countries, but also compared to other American sports. From your perspective, what should brands do to make sure they are understanding the nuances of soccer fandom in America?
I think the word nuance is the key one, Jorge, because you opened this span of this webinar, mentioned that there are 132 million Americans that are interested in the World Cup next year. So there is no way you're going to have a strategy, an idea, a campaign that's going to please, that's going to hit, that's going to resonate with 132 million people in the same way. So I think that if I were a brand interested in reaching and connecting with consumers through the World Cup or through soccer overall, I would start with maybe 3 steps. First of all, talk to the experts. This is not time to improvise. This is not a time because you used to play soccer at college or high school. You're capable to develop a strategy and a creative idea. There's a lot at stakes. Second, I think that you have to invest in segmentation. Not only you mentioned the multicultural segmentation. I have some data here that I wrote in a Forbes article that was published a few months ago. 44% of US Hispanics are interested in the World Cup next year. 38% of Black Americans are interested in the World Cup next year. Right now, I can tell you that the Black experience around soccer and the Latino experience around soccer probably is very different, right? And even within the Latinos, as I mentioned, a Colombian, Argentina, and a Brazilian like me may have a different experience versus somebody like from Bolivia, who probably is going to qualify. Let's see. So segmentation is very important, and then comes the magic. How can you actually develop broad ideas and strategies that can connect with this 132 million without being stereotypical, without being generic, without using all the old tools that brands use, but at the same time, how you're going to be efficient with your budget, with your segmentation? I believe that 2026 is the right moment to balance mass media and social and digital and influencers, that you can go a little bit more segmented on social and digital strategies and try to find a cohesive message at the broad mass media perspective, but carefully with the stereotypical ideas, carefully with a one size fits all, because that's going to be the enemy of efficiency, is going to be the lack of effectiveness. And CMOs and marketers need to be balancing both the efficiency of the deployment of their budget, but also the effectiveness, the ROI that Ricardo mentioned, because that's what matters in the end.
Avoid stereotypes, avoid a one-size-fits-all approach. As we say here at Alma, specificity drives authenticity. That's the key of everything.
Please, no advertising with waves, goal extended for 1 minute.
Please, no more. Adrian, let's talk about talent as a force multiplier. Many brands right now are considering talent partnerships for the World Cup, whether it is hiring a player, a former player, a soccer celebrity, an actor, the Ted Lassos of the world. Many clients are trying to use talent kind of like as a shortcut, for a lack of a better word, to build an association with the sport. What would be your recommendations for advertisers? What are the key do's and don'ts when selecting the right talent?
Yeah, I think this is going to come full circle from all that Ricardo and Sarah and Isaac and Nick have been saying. It comes to authenticity, right? So especially whether or not you are sponsor or a non-sponsor, there's no denying that the power of celebrity when it's applied correctly, right? And the World Cup is going to bring a lot of there's going to be a lot of brands activating around the World Cup. So how do you stand out, right? It's going to be an incredibly crowded marketplace. So an endorsement or a player or a legend are going to be key, right? To make sure that you stand out. Today, audiences tend to disconnect super quickly if they don't feel that everything is authentic. So that's why a player is so important. I mean, they're not only spokespersons, they are the connective tissue, right? The emotional link that ties everything together, the emotional link between a brand and the fans. Because now fans today follow players just as much as they follow the teams, right? So the right athlete can authentically magnify that brand awareness. I mean, just to think back at with, let me give you an example with Jared Borghetti, right? Every time we're on the streets with him, people always stop him and remind him of that goal he scored against Italy. And for some reason, everybody has a very uh, quick story behind that goal, where they were, who were they with, but most importantly, how they made them feel. They always said, "Oh, I jumped as high as I can remember." It's one of those times where you remember exactly where you were, who you were with, etc. So talk about passion, talk about connection, talk about standing out. So if you're able to pair your good creative with the right player, then I think you're set up for success. So again, done right, I think it provides that emotional connection and that credibility. And done wrong is just money thrown to waste.
I love this idea of finding someone that feels authentic and that fits with your brand story, with your brand narrative. It's not only about, okay, how many followers does this player has, or the reach or the scale is, how this player or how this talent can actually fit into my current narrative, to the point that feels authentic, that this is a pairing that really works and it is not forced. That's very, very, very important. Ricardo, let me go back to you. What lessons from other major sport events like the Olympics or even the Super Bowl should brands apply or avoid when planning for the World Cup? There are some things that definitely could be best practices, but I'm sure we also need to understand the differences between this event versus others. But what do you think we can learn from those events, and keep in mind, again, for applying it or for avoiding those things?
So I think that the key to success is a well-defined problem that you're trying to solve. And a Super Bowl, or in any other sport, will offer a lot of different opportunities. The difference, I think, with the World Cup is that the volume of things happening and the duration of the event makes it very complicated for any brand to stand out. So at the end of the World Cup, when you do the traditional polls of which are the brands that you remember being involved with this, I mean, there will be a lot of brands that are already talking about it, that have been talking about it for years, and we will spend a lot more than most of the other brands. So it's really hard to compete with them, and that also happens in the Super Bowl and a few other events. But if you want to learn from the best brands, is what is the problem that you're trying to solve? So the best activation of the Super Bowl or the best activation of the Olympics might be something that you have never seen, but solve the problem for that brand. So maybe your problem is connecting with customers, and if you use the event well enough and you manage to attract 100 new customers, that's successful. So. My advice to any of you looking at other events is don't get distracted by the noise of the other brands. Figure out what's right for you, buy what you need to develop content and to establish this communication with the target that you're looking for. As Isaac said, you're not going to talk to everyone that is watching a game, but if you're able to talk to that fraction of fans that are interested in your product, in your business, you're going to win. When I worked at Visa, for example, and Wells Fargo was a partner of Visa, when Sarah was there, success for a credit card is, of course, is use of the card, but it's a lot making a client like Wells Fargo do well. So this is something that you don't hear every day. But if Wells Fargo is doing well on their business with Visa, Visa is winning. So that's a measure of success that a lot of people don't see, but it's a very specific problem that Visa managed to answer with the Olympics and the and the World Cup, for example. So figure out what's the problem, buy what you need. Don't pay a lot of attention in the noise of all the other brands. Is my advice from any big event.
I love that idea because many times the first thing we hear from clients is, okay, let's see what others are doing. And I think it's a good exercise, but I think the mindset of don't get distracted by the noise of other brands. Follow your own path and try to understand what's good for you and what is it exactly that you need and how can you have a distinctive role in the event is probably the holy grail. Isaac, the World Cup, as Ricardo was mentioning, is not an event that happens one day and that's it. The tournament runs for weeks, 6 weeks this next year. From your lens, how should brands plan for a 1 month or a 6 weeks event? Is there going to be creative wear out? Should brands plan for different day parts, develop several assets or multiple sets of content for different occasions or even different moments of the tournament to maximize engagement? Do you think wear out is going to be a thing next year?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are several ways that we can tackle this question, Jorge. First of all, for me, the World Cup already started. The qualifying is World Cup. December, we're going to have the groups assigned. Then we're going to have friendlies. Then the countries are coming to Mexico, Canada, and the US probably around April, May. There is discussions about the roster. So the World Cup is really not only when the sports tournament starts, but there's a wave, there's a crescendo, there's an opportunity to build with time this passion that's not suddenly is going to be switched on and switched off. The other thing is the World Cup is going to be different from any other World Cup. It's the first time there are going to be 48 countries. We never had 48 countries in the World Cup, extending not only the length of the World Cup, extending the number of countries and the number of fans and ethnicities being represented, but also extended the number of games per day. We don't have the final times, but we know exactly how many games, and we're going to have 5 games per day. In special days, we're going to have 6 games per day. From Eastern time zone to Central Mountain Pacific time zone. So there is going to be a lot of opportunities around occasion-based marketing, right? Restaurants, for instance, can sell breakfast, snacks, lunch, afternoon snacks, dinner, late snacks, just to give an example. And because of the number of games, there's going to be wear out. Wear out is already a big threat for any advertiser in the World Cup, even the past World Cups. I am surprised and shocked by how many brands spend millions of dollars on the media package and very few money on refresh creatives, right? They prefer to spend money on media that's gonna wear out very fast. And depending on who's your segment, who's your target, if it's a kind of a middle to core viewer, in the first week, that viewer is already tired to see your ad. In the second week, he or she is hating your brand. In the third week, he's organizing a petition to move your ad out of the air because people cannot watch it anymore. So there's got to be a balance between how much you're going to invest on media and how much you're going to invest in content. Because with so many games in terms of days and so many games during the day, the threat of wear out, it's real. And I'm not talking only about the official sponsors in English and Spanish, even on social media, the activities, there's got to be a richness to keep the message fresh while the World Cup develops. And again, this requires a level of sophistication that's rarely seen in the US in the events, because like a Super Bowl is a one-day event. Sometimes the Olympics doesn't show that kind of a viewership because it changes the sport. But for the World Cup, at least compared to the World Cups, I've been living here for 26 years in the US, I see very few companies really paying attention on the quality and the quantity of the messages that go throughout that month, 35, 40 days.
I think the awareness of the problem, because it is very important today. I don't know if many advertisers out there are actually right now planning for that wear out, for that, it is important that from the get-go we understand that we need to plan for different occasions, for different moments, and that repetition is going to be there. There are, if I'm not mistaken, 100 and something games this year. We are going to have more games than ever. Yes, after day 3 and 4, I know repetition is something that we all praise in advertising, but there's a moment where it's just too much. So planning for the content, and not only for the budget for the media, is going to be highly important. Sarah, you've been heavily involved in women's soccer, which is hugely influential in the US. Of course, the 2026 World Cup is right now the headline. But we also have the Women's World Cup coming right after in 2027. From your perspective, how should brands be preparing today to not only maximize the men's tournament, but also build continuity into the women's game, ensuring that they are part of both conversations in an authentic way?
Yeah. I'm gonna get on I'm gonna preach a little bit and say, the women are going to be seen as proxies for the men during the World Cup. Adrian will have a number of talent specific to Mexico. Doing all types of activations next year. They're going to be busy. Adrian's going to be super, super busy, but there's only so many players. And so we've got the women available to be able to talk about the men's game. And a lot of the women are, they're friends with the players that are playing the World Cup. So that's a huge opportunity for sure. I would say in terms of continuity, what would be really neat is to start following the matches and see if there's a way to build off some of the storylines in the men's World Cup that perhaps could be threaded into the women's World Cup. Is it rivalry matches? Is it some moment that happened either this World Cup coming up or before that could be tied? I think there's a lot of room to play, and because the women have not been have not been used as much as a resource as they can be. I think there are ways to break through. Ricardo was talking about, like, it's going to be really hard to break through on the men's side. So I think the women who are, just as savvy, as smart, they can do everything from, be available to do commentary at watch parties, or be able to break down some events. So I would say that's like one piece. There's Nick mentioned Ted Lasso. The 4th season is going to be around women's soccer. That's supposed to be aired next year. Can you leverage that? There's an ecosystem, especially in the women's media space around soccer, that could still be applied towards next year. But for me, there's going to be more media rights were, I think, extended or announced, like this last week. There's going to be more inventory around the women's game next year and into 2027. So I just think what could be really fun is a brand to pay attention to the men's World Cup and see what storylines can be applied to 2027. So you see this continuity. I think that could be a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll see some interesting creative there.
Yeah.
And maybe that alleviates some of the creative wear out that will happen for sure during the men's World Cup.
And I was recently hearing somebody saying that think of them as the same world. Don't separate the worlds. It's not like, oh, there's a soccer for male and there's a soccer for female. Like, no, it's soccer, and sometimes those combinations and using one for the other could potentially definitely be useful.
I hope, for me, a dream scenario would be more people using Adrian in 2027 and having the men cheer on the women. Like we're seeing that success play out in the WNBA in the US, so we want to see more of it. And we see that some in European soccer too, but we want to see more of it here in the side of the hemisphere.
Yep. One friendly reminder for the audience that is connected: if you want to use the Q&A tab for asking a question, we're going to have some time in a few minutes, so the panelists can tackle that. Last piece before we open for some questions from the chat. Nick, social engagement. There are recent numbers that are showing that social engagement has outpaced traditional broadcast in terms of audience when it comes to the World Cup. Just as an example, there are currently 600 million hours of YouTube content that was developed during the 2022 World Cup. That's and if I'm not mistaken, most of that content doesn't come from the traditional broadcasters. It's fans that are creating content, the players who are creating content. So the conversation is going to go beyond TV, beyond the broadcast, and it's going to be definitely part of social media. How should brands adapt their content strategies for creators, for YouTube, for TikTok, or even for the common WhatsApp chats that we're going to have during the World Cup?
Yeah, I think we talked earlier about the potential wear out of broadcast media. Obviously, social is where you can be a bit more versatile and play in the moment and react to what happens throughout the tournament. And I think that the notion of like proactive reactivity in the lead up to the tournament, i.e., planning for potential moments, outcomes, and so on, but in an efficient way, it can be done. It doesn't need to be creating a ton of creative that 90% of it won't get used. I think you can be quite smart about it. That almost always breaks through in some shape or form, but most brands, by and large, don't plan for it. I think just like a really simple example that performed really well, actually, in the UK, Lay's planned for, and this is before they were sponsored the World Cup, this is a few years ago, they planned for England's inevitable knockout of the last World Cup. Unfortunately, but with a super simple creative that was showing like a broken Lay's chip in the shape of a broken heart, saying all about heartbreak, you did us proud, with its messaging, posted on social, but also took out full-page ads, out of home, just blank background with a chip on it, super simple, and it just eclipsed anything any other sponsor did officially, across the UK. So just like one really tactical example, but with a huge impact, and that's just one moment. So there's an opportunity to be replicating that behavior all the way through the tournament, not just around how a team performs or your national team, but lots of other things. There's lots of trends and memes and so on that obviously pop up throughout the tournament. I think creators more generally are like obviously a super valuable and versatile asset when it comes to activating the World Cup, like whether that's documenting what's happening on the ground in host cities, like that's candidly something more difficult for people to police, and a bit of a gray area, depending on where they are and what they're doing. But there's definitely a lot of opportunity on the ground in key cities, but there's also, the value they provide in terms of, an always on voice throughout the tournament or amplifying brand stunts and activations. They should really be like I guess a default component of any strategy for like a non-official brand of the World Cup. And I think it's worth adding that these don't need to be soccer or even sports creators, right? From an influencer point of view, as we said, like World Cup transcends the core audience. So creative strategies that can and arguably should incorporate personas from music, food, gaming, fashion, obviously depending on the brand, depending on the category, but the audience expands far beyond a football audience, and almost people are expecting to see that convergence with other areas of culture, which the World Cup does in spades. So there's a big opportunity from an influencer standpoint, full stop.
And I think I love what you said about plan for real time. There are many things that are going to happen during the tournament. Brands need to be ready, and they can prepare in advance. We know that 99% of the teams are going to lose. That's just the reality of the game. So we know that there are going to be VAR reviews. We know that there are going to be refresh pauses for the players. We know that there are going to be goals. We're going to know that there are going to be red cards. Those things can be planned in advance, so brands are ready for what is going to happen. That's a great quote. Definitely plan for real time. All right, we have some interesting questions in the chat. Let me read you a few, and we can try to tackle some of them. Here's one from Kianta. How can brands authentically and effectively market to diverse audience, including international visitors, in the face of anti-DEI sentiment, restrictive immigration policies, and a perceived isolationist instance in the US? This is part of the conversation, definitely. Sara.
If I can jump in, no, great question. I mean, that's what we saw in 2018, and quite frankly, Trump got elected, and as sponsors of the Mexican national team, that was a moment that was really upsetting, right? To especially Latino fans in the US. And so there were two reasons why we were able to create these debit cards, create the debit cards that represented each of the countries that were playing in the World Cup, plus countries that we knew the bank had a big population of, and so that was a really easy way that felt meaningful. And even our campaign ad where we had Landon Donovan rooting for Mexico when the US didn't make it, that was a moment that we felt was really important, was to have us rooting, have the US rooting for Mexico, who's our neighbor, in the face of a very tense political climate. So that was some of the work that was super rewarding to me. I love that question. I think it's very thoughtful. If there's a way for your creative to address right, because who's going to argue with you having the flags from all the teams playing in the World Cup, right? These are facts. And so, if there's some way to just, kind of factually celebrate these teams, that could be one way to do it, but super important.
Any other thoughts?
Jorge, of course, this is, I was actually reading Salim's question, which goes in the same area. Yeah. Of course, we know that there is an environment around us, but the optimistic in me sees soccer transcending a lot of the things. I think soccer can really unite us, and we can enjoy a great moment. I attended a lot of games earlier this year on the FIFA first Clubs World Cup, and I think it was considered a very interesting test for the World Cup next year. And I can see that actually before the panel, we were talking about the Korean fans, the Brazilian fans, the South African fans coming here. So of course, we don't live out in a bubble. There is a reality out there, but I think these are the moments that there are few properties, there are few passions that can unite us and can overcome the difficulties, the whatever situation, and even wars. We all know the story, or we should tell the story of Pelé playing in Africa and stopping a war to happen because both sides of the war wanted to see Pelé playing in Africa. I think soccer has this magic power. And hopefully, no matter what, we're going to have a great World Cup because of that.
200%. Ricardo, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I have worked in several FIFA World Cups, and it is there is not one that goes by without some off the field challenge. And the political climate in the United States is one today, but if you go back to Russia, and I go back all the way to 2002 in Germany, when was my first one. Every year there's something, and the good brands with the good stories, they don't ignore what's off the field. They are aware of what's going on, but they focus on their story and tell their story in the context, no matter how bad the context can be.
Yeah,
and they win because they are focused on what matters to consumers and to fans, and not on getting distracted again by what's around the field.
That's great. We have
just to echo one last thing on that one. I think we saw it with the with Copa America, and last year this year with the Club World Cup. Thousands of people came. Nothing happened. Only amazing stories. Only what soccer does. That's why they call it the beautiful game. It brings people together, and I I will echo Isaac on that one. The positive in me feels like this is going to, aside from the political climate, this is going to supersede all of that, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, many people actually think that we need the World Cup. That with the current climate, we need the World Cup to get back together. So we have another question from Tanya, and she is asking, as business look to align with the World Cup, how can they strategically leverage the volunteer workforce, not just operationally, but as a branded extension of their values, engagement, marketing, and other efforts? I think, Ricardo, that was something that you tapped into at some point today.
Yeah, so unless you are a partner of FIFA, you know, technically, legally speaking, you cannot do anything with the volunteers. The volunteers are an extension of FIFA, and they are controlled as any of the FIFA official rights. So some of the sponsors, they do campaigns dedicated to the volunteers. They have specific tools to talk to them. But brands that are not partners of FIFA, they are very controlled to stay away from the volunteers.
Okay, let's do a lightning round, if you agree. One sentence each. If you could give brands one golden rule for winning the World Cup moment, what would it be?
Have somebody that actually knows soccer, not just played it, but understands the nuances of the game and the fan base, especially the supporters. I think that's really key. You can't, we did some creative pieces with Wells Fargo, and I think this was more general market than diverse segments. And there was one piece of creative that I was like, this is not going to work, and I was overruled. And it got the loudest commentary on social media, but like nobody likes the Equalizer. They're like, everybody loves the Equalizer was like the tagline. I'm like, nobody likes the Equalizer. Like, well, if you're the equalizing team, you like it, but the other half is upset. So anyway, we get a lot of negative commentary. So just know what you're, have an expert that can really understand the game to lead the work.
Isaac?
I would say that if you are planning to engage, if you're a brand planning to engage, understand that the opportunity is not only advertising, it's marketing. Okay, look, following what Ricardo said, look at the way you can engage your employees. Your employees want to watch the game, and it's going to be very low productivity during doing this 30-something days. If you are an owner of restaurant or any business that have TV screens, there are so many other ways that you can activate besides advertising. It would be worth spending time to figure out how your brand, how your service, how your business can fit this environment. We talked a lot about advertising. Of course, we love advertising, but advertising is just one component. The winning brands, the best brands, developing holistic, omni-channel, comprehensive plans, and sometimes they don't even have the advertising component, but it should be a marketing plan, not an advertising plan.
Nick?
I think mine's like a watch out on strategic positioning from a creative standpoint, but also to Isaac's point, your broader marketing approach is just there is going to be so much noise, and 80% of the messaging will be around themes of passion, togetherness, determination, whatever it may be, and a lot of it ends up looking very similar around the World Cup, which is actually an opportunity for a lot of brands because you've got a baseline of a lot of stuff that looks the same. So I think just pushing beyond the traditional tropes of World Cup fandom really is key, just given the sheer volume that you're up against. But a distinct message can work disproportionately hard because of the backdrop it's being received in versus what everyone else is saying.
Adrian, any parting words?
If this was just one recommendation, I would say don't just translate your English creative into Spanish and think that you're done. Right? We see that all the time, and it just falls flat. I mean, the World Cup is an opportunity to really dive deep into authenticity and culture. And if you want to win, You have to speak to fans in a way that feels real, right? And the good news is that there's a lot of experts, and not only the people in this panel, but also beyond, right? Who live this space every day and can help brands get it right. So that's how you might be able to win and stand out during the World Cup.
That's amazing. And Ricardo?
Yeah, so be specific of what's the problem that you're trying to solve, and do a lot on that one problem. Don't try to cover the world. I mean, there's a lot of people talking about a lot of different things during the World Cup. If you know what you need, the problem that you're trying to solve, and put all your marketing power from the strategy, the positioning, the communication development, the real time social. If you do everything to solve that one problem, you will succeed. So, yeah, be focused.
That's an amazing. Thank you all. This is we could do this forever. Honestly, that's a master class in a few minutes. Here are a few takeaways I'm hearing today. I'm gonna try to wrap it up. But the first thing, if you're an advertiser today that wants to activate your brand during the World Cup but don't know how, the first thing to keep in mind is you don't need the badge. You need to have the interest, to find the role, and to have an expert with you helping you develop that plan. Lead with the nuances. Understand the nuances. Understand that authenticity beats generic and stereotypes every single time. Culture wins. Earn trust with real communities, not with broad cliches. As Adrian was mentioning, talent is a strategy. Pick for fit, for authenticity, for story, and for usage. Use whatever it is that you develop for the World Cup. Use it as much as possible so you can maximize the ROI. Avoid creative wear out. Plan for different moments, for different occasions, for different situations that could happen in the tournament. Keep it fresh. Plan for the real time, and finally go beyond ads. Think how this could be activated in retail, in product, with your internal team. Collapse, turn the boss into a full marketing mix plan. So I hope this is useful. And before we let you go, let me get back to the presentation for a moment. Oh, this always happens. I thought it was so. There you go. Okay. We covered a lot of ground today, but the truth is, every brand situation is different, and there's, as we've heard today, there's no one size fits all playbook. That's why we've built a way to take these strategies and tailor them directly to your brand. Together with Alma and other offices of DDV North America, and with the support of some of the experts that you have met today, we're offering a custom World Cup playbook for brands who want to activate during the World Cup. It covers 5 essentials: legal do's and don'ts if you are not an official sponsor, recommendations on how to approach talent partnerships, tailor-made for your category, for your brand, possible communication territories where you could play a role, possible insights of soccer fandom where that you could tap into, where and when to show up, and some practical tips on how your brand can activate the full marketing mix and go beyond advertising. This playbook, of course, would be built around your category, your audience, and your business goals. If you're interested, you can reach out to Emily to schedule a short consultation. You can see her contact details on screen. Reach out, and we'll help you tailor a World Cup plan so you're ready to move and score a few goals in 2026. Big thanks to Isaac, to Ricardo, to Sara, to Adrian, And Nick, to all of you online, thank you for joining. Thanks for spending time with us today. We'll see you soon. I think that's it for today, and we really hope you found this conversation useful. Thank you again. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye all.